Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of The Real Thomas Jefferson, number 45, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And Dr. Richard Bellato can't be with us. He has some familial affairs to which he needs to attend. I will be your mystery guest, and I must remain incognito because any sort of awareness of who I am might be dangerous. So. I want to welcome you to another episode of The Real Thomas Jefferson, episode 45. And as we talked of before, the aim of the show is to get real about Thomas Jefferson, clarity through critical analysis of Jefferson's writings and the writings of Jeffersonian scholars. Aim to revisit and revise the revisionists who are in the business of deconstructing Jefferson's prose, his letters, his essays, his memos, and so forth. Nearly all Jeffersonian biographers today take it upon themselves to write of Jefferson's Janus facedness. What Jefferson says most often cannot be understood literally. His prose must be deconstructed. And so intuitiveness and knack are needed in preference to logical acumen. It's commonplace to call the man a hypocrite, a racist, and even contradiction. However, so a person can be a contradiction. And these epithets are typically cast from the perspective of today's mores. This show then aims to dispel the myth that Jefferson can be known, and logic, not intuitive and discretionary deconstruction, is the method we employ. I'm the mystery guest. Today we're doing something different. After reading Colonel Holochek's essay, Jefferson and Executive Action, on Abbeville's website, which was published not long ago, someone, an Abbevillian, had this comment. And I quote, "Can't put Biden anywhere near Jefferson." Trump, on the other hand, seems to be acting more and more in the interest of saving our republic, whether he is aware of it or not. While nowhere near as eloquent as Jefferson, his presidential library may not have any books, and you can bet that's the case. He is a compassionate, streetwise New Yorker. So today we're going to look at those comments. Is Trump really a sort of modern day Jeffersonian? And we're going to pose certain questions to Dr. H on our journey today. And let me begin with the first question. All right, Colonel. The comment for the basis of this show is one that many Trumpian mavens have articulated, the notion of Trump saving our republic, and in the content of what else was articulated, strongly suggests a Trumpian return to Jeffersonian principles. Do you agree with my reading? Can we then set the stage for your comparison of the presidencies of Jefferson and Trump? Why, thank you very much, mystery guest, for that. And your first question concerns Jefferson Trump being a sort of Jeffersonian because he's saving our republic. The quote from the one Abbevillian who is arguing that Trump is a sort of modern day Jeffersonian Republican. Intriguing thought, so let's give it some attention. Now, a Trumpian return to Jeffersonian principles. We promised to talk more about that next time, where we're going to, I know Dr. Bellato will ask me some questions about just what were Jeffersonian principles of Republican government. We'll put Trump to the test, so I won't go too much with that. But I always wonder, when Trump came to office, he's got the MAGA, the Make America Great Again. I never heard him at any one time articulate precisely what he means by great again. What period of American history, to which period of American history is he referring when he's talking about again? He never articulates that. He's certainly no maven of American history. Recently, he was walking the one Fox host through the Oval Office, and behind some curtains, he showed her the original copy of the Declaration of Independence, and she was aghast. This has got to be kept from light. It's a facsimile. It's not the original copy. I'm not even sure if Trump is aware that Jefferson wrote that. In one of his interviews, he was talking about how Jefferson was a prominent writer of the U.S. Constitution. So he doesn't even know that. That's pretty sad for the President of the United States. But I want to, saving our republic from what? That's what I ask here. I'm not sure how, what Trump is doing to save our republic, and what period, to which period is he referring when he's talking about making America great again. Um, I'll leave it at that. It's just not much of an answer to your question, but I suppose you'll have, you have other questions and better questions to ask. Question two. What would you, or how would you compare Trump's intelligence to Jefferson? Okay, your second question, the intelligence of Jefferson and Trump, really far apart. John F. Kennedy once remarked, I have his remark with me, there was a White House dinner with, in honor of several Nobel Prize winners. They were all seated and having dinner with John F. Kennedy, the president. He says, I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge that has ever been gathered together at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. I don't think anybody will ever, in years to come, say that about Donald Trump. And Donald Trump dined alone. You can rest assured there's a diet Pepsi and a large McDonald's fries and perhaps a quarter pounder and a Big Mac in front of him. And yeah, there's another quote of on Jefferson. This is another quote I like a lot. It's written by biographer Henry Adams, early biographer. He said, a few broad strokes of the brush would paint the portraits of all the early presidents, with this exception, and a few more strokes would answer for any member of their many cabinets. But Jefferson can be painted only touch by touch with a fine pencil, and the perfection of the likeness depends upon the shifting and uncertain flicker of its semi-transparent shadows. Do you think that that would be the same with Donald Trump, that he would require, because of the subtleties of his large intellect and imagination, would require the subtle touches of a fine pencil to get the subtleties, the nuances of the breadth and depth of his intelligence, the many topics that he studied and understood. Donald Trump is not even a reader, and our Abbevillian even mentioned that as well. He's not much of a reader. At one point, when he was asked to read part of the Constitution, as many of the extant presidents were asked to read parts of the Constitution, he said, "This is really, it's like another language. How can anybody do that?" I suppose he struggled through it. I've never seen that. And then you get Trump, who says stuff like, I remember when he was talking about groceries. He was being interviewed, and he says, I have more complaints on groceries. This is he speaking at Motor City Casino in Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, and a presidential nominee, a little spot where he's giving a little talk there. He says, the word grocery, it's sort of a simple word, but it sort of means like everything you eat. The stomach is speaking, it always does, and I have more complaints about that. Bacon and things going up double, triple, and quadruple. So here we have an instance of Trump's large intelligence. Trump is not a highly intelligent person. It's like there's no coherence to anything he says. He gets on a topic, then he talks about groceries, and then groceries conjures up all sorts of neural connections with other things. He's probably aching. He says it's the stomach is speaking. He's probably dying for a Big Mac at the time. So who knows what's going on? So if you want my assessment of the intelligence of Donald Trump to Thomas Jefferson, these are polar. These are on polar sides of things. Jefferson is on one side, and Trump is far away on the other side. Not to say he's not he's wholly unintelligent. I don't say that, but he's not going to impress anybody with his acumen or his imagination. Right? Everything for him is the art of the deal. So I hope that answers your second question, mystery guest. Question 3. In your essay, Donald Trump and Thomas Jefferson on the Exercise of Power, you claim that Trump lusts after political power, but Jefferson does not. Yet a host of scholars, John Meacham, Henry Winsek, Pete Onuf, disagree. In fact, among contemporary Jeffersonian scholars, you seem to be a bit of a lone wolf. Why are you so sure that you are right and the others are wrong? Yeah, a lot of people, Meacham, of course, talks about Jefferson, the art of power. Onuf and other people talk about how Jefferson really, a number of people talk about Jefferson's lust of power, and the proof they give is that he was engaged in politics for 40 years. Problem I have with that is there are a large number of quotes where Jefferson says, speaks openly about his detestation of power. And I take that seriously. I do. So the question is, well, why, if you detest something, why would you practice it for roughly 40 years? And the answer to that was he was needed. He didn't like practice of the law. He wasn't good at it. He was a lawyer before he became a politician, before he entered the Virginian House of Burgesses. And he started his political career. He wasn't good at law. He didn't have a large, booming voice, and he didn't like to engage in taradiddle or sophisms or buffoonery or uttering falsehoods all day long. He was interested in winning cases, but only if his client was innocent, for example. And so he wasn't a good lawyer. He turned to politics because his country needed him, and he was good at it. As his summer review of the rights of British America in 1774 showed, he had natural felicity and talent with his pen. And he was sort of encouraged on to be part of the project for liberating the colonies against the mother country, against England. Now, here's a couple of quotes. January 1, 1797, when John Adams wins the presidency and Jefferson gets second, the largest number of votes, is automatically vice president. He says to James Madison, "Never was there a more solid unwillingness founded on rigorous calculation formed in the mind of any man short of peremptory refusal. No arguments, therefore, are necessary to reconcile me to a relinquishment of the first office or acceptance of the second." Now, I want to go back to compare that with Trump on groceries. I have more complaints on grocery, right? The word grocery, it's sort of simple word, but it sort of means like everything you eat. The stomach is speaking, it always does, and I have more complaints about that. Bacon and things going up, double, triple, quadruple. If you compare that to what Jefferson says when he's speaking to Madison about being excited and happily taking the second office of the young republic, the young Confederation of States. I also talk about Trump. Trump when Laura Ingraham of Fox was walking through the White House with him and interviewing him. This is when we had the great scene where she is shown by Trump the actual Declaration of Independence, which is ridiculous. And Trump informed her, you're actually walking with a three-time president. Biden didn't win. I won in a landslide. There was all sorts of corruption going on. We know from studying Putin's sort of cyber interference in the elections of many democratic countries. There's no question with the connection of between Putin and Trump that Putin was interfering in all three elections in which Trump ran for the presidency to the best of his ability. Right? There is an abundance of evidence on that. To what extent that got Trump elected, I can't speculate on that, but there's no question of that. But anyways, he shows her the original Declaration of Independence and so forth, and talks about him being a three-time president. Trump is a runaway ego. He is a malignant, as psychotherapists and psychologists call him, a malignant narcissist, right? I learned yesterday that Putin played Trump just like a fiddle. He said, in trying to curry favor with Trump, he said, when the bullet grazed, he goes, the first thing I had to do is go into the church and pray for Trump because he's my friend. And then he had a renowned painter in Russia paint a portrait of Trump to give to Trump when Trump's emissary went there to talk about peace settlements and the ceasefire and so forth, Witkoff. And Witkoff was moved by that. Said, "This guy really is a true friend." It's not a true friend. I have 3 chapters of recent book on the games that Putin plays. He's a very savvy person, and he was played like a fiddle. But he claimed to be 3-time president. This is a guy who lusts after power. He's a narcissist, and nothing excites him more than being president of the most powerful country in the world. The only thing that would make things better if he had the unlimited authority of Vladimir Putin, right? We could do whatever he wants without any intervention by the Congress, any congresspersons or members of the press or the judiciary interfering with his plans. Question 4. Colonel H., you also claim that Jefferson always followed the letter of the law, that he was ever a strict constructionist, and you give as an example his tenure as governor of Virginia from 1769-1771. What of his presidency, the Louisiana Purchase, the Embargo Act, and the threat of force on northern seafarers not abiding by the Embargo Act? Are you not being inconsistent? So Jefferson, yeah, talk about Jefferson's strict constructionism. He always was. And his strict constructionism got him into great trouble during his years of governing Virginia when the British Army came in to Virginia, and Jefferson had to do what he tried to do to get a militia against them. He didn't force soldiers into the army. It had to be voluntary, and that was a costly mistake. And Jefferson learned from that. Jefferson really, articulated many occasions that he believed that the Constitution was not a plastic thing. It must be adhered to. Whatever it explicitly says must be obeyed. And what is not explicitly said cannot just be assumed to be true by a president who wants power. Now, when you're right to say that when Jefferson got into the office of the presidency, he he went after the Louisiana Purchase. Did he have presidential authority? No, but it was something he thought was for the good of the country. So he extended his powers beyond what the Constitution allowed him to do. There was the Embargo Act that he put into action to try to get, the northern states and all the states together to act in concert in terms of not importing or exporting goods to England instead of as a proxy for war. And of course, he did, like you said, threaten northern seafarers, right, who weren't abiding by the Embargo Act. So Jefferson wasn't perfectly consistent with that, but I think he would say he learned, and he does say this in 2 letters at least, he learned in his mature years when the country's existence is threatened. One can take liberties, I think he thought, with the Constitution, but he was careful not to take too many liberties and assume the role of a king or an emperor or someone who has dictatorial powers over. Trump, in contrast, seems to me very happy being a dictator, impeaching members of the judiciary who disagree with moves he's trying to make, so forth, silencing congressmen, congresswomen who disagree with him, and so forth. So he, I study him every day rather intensely and studied the situation in Ukraine. And there's no question, getting rid of Elon Musk, getting rid of all sorts of programs that are helping the poor and the needy, to the effect of helping the wealthy, the most wealthy people, the wealthiest people. So I think there's a big difference there. Trump is really, I think, a dictator in president's clothing, and Jefferson tried as best he could to be as fair and to act in strict accordance with the Constitution when events allowed, when the nation was not at threat. Now, Trump gets around that. We saw from that wonderful quote at the beginning of this that Trump is trying to save the country, right? Saving our republic, right? There's a threat, right? The only threat to the republic that exists right now, the most colossal threat, I'm not talking about economic problems because we are so far in debt, there's probably no sense in which we can really save the republic. We're on a downward spiral economically in terms of what's going to happen in the future with our country, with our political power, and so forth. So I think there's no question that Trump does not even care about the Constitution. He acts any way he wants. He acts nolens volens, right? Willing or non-willing, he's going to do whatever he wants to do. He doesn't care about constitutional constraints. Jefferson took constitutional constraints very seriously, though, as I've said, his second term as president in the first term of the Louisiana Purchase shows that he grudgingly ignored the Constitution when he thought it needed to be done. So he wasn't perfect in that regard. And finally, you also claim, Colonel Holochek, that Jefferson hated politics, though he practiced it for some 40 years, and Trump loves it. Now, how could someone like Jefferson do something for 40 years and hate it? Does not that seem strange? The last question. Jefferson hated politics, right? He practiced it for 40 years. I'll just read a couple of quotes. And here I'm different from other people because instead of assuming Jefferson's a hypocrite, I think he's not a hypocrite. I think we need to take him seriously when he says something, unless you can give me a very good reason for not doing so. January 26, 1811, he says to Destat de Tracy, I know that I have never been so well pleased as when I could shift power from my own on the shoulders of others, nor have I ever been able to conceive how any rational being could propose happiness to himself from the exercise of power over others. Jefferson here is a real, we'd say today, Democrat, a real Jeffersonian Republican, where the president is, or the governor is just primus inter pares, is the first among equals. He is a citizen who is granted privileges by virtue of the citizenry to act as the presiding authority of either the state or the nation, but that is something conferred upon him by the citizens, doesn't give him the power to act against the best interests of the citizenry. In his first inaugural address in 1801, March, he says, sometimes it says that man cannot be trusted with the government of himself. Can he then be trusted with the government of others? It's a very wonderful, stoic, Aristotelian Platonic sentiment, virtue ethics sentiment, that if you can't control your own self, if you can't govern yourself, how can you govern other people? And this applies abundantly to Donald Trump. He is a person who is out of control. He's not a highly rational person in my estimation. He's acts by feeling, by emotion. A lot of people agree with this. Some people think that there's something hidden, that he really has these ulterior rational motions that drive his mercurial, erratic behavior, and that really, if we really got to know him really well, we'd understand he's a highly, highly intelligent person who only seems to be behaving irrationally. No, he's mercurial, he's erratic, he's irrational, he's spontaneous, he acts by virtue of his emotions. If he feels one way, he'll do something, and he feels differently the other day, he'll say against it. He calls Zelensky a dictator. Then times later, he says, did I say that? Weeks later, right? So, as I said, we get many psychologists have taken upon themselves to study Donald Trump, and all of them agree on his malignant, right, narcissism, that he is a narcissist in a very dangerous way, a way dangerous for our country and for the rest of the world. We can see how he played with taking away intelligence and wealth and other resources away from Ukraine and Zelensky for a little while, and he got mad at Zelensky. And all that did is cause numerous other casualties and devastation. It's not that it doesn't register with him that, if I decide to do this, that people are going to die. He's always talking about the thousands of people dying. But when he does so, he never talks about particulars. He wouldn't even look at the pictures Zelensky showed him of the devastation. He just talks about 1,000 people are dying. It's bad. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. But he's not. The particulars don't faze him. He floats in the sea of generalities, and that's a very dangerous thing. I'll give you a quote from one. He's always about winning the deal. One psychotherapist, John Gardner, writes, his hypermanic temperament is where his anger comes to the fore. The 40 tweets in one night, even on holidays. His tweets are always filled with rage, constantly labeling people as losers. He does this all the time. Biden's a loser, right? Trump is up at 3 a.m. on a holiday ranting about how anyone who doesn't idolize him is a loser, right? He will destroy and inflict pain on anyone who won't worship him, right? He is just infatuated with himself. A quote from a biography written of him by his niece talks about how his dad instilled in him that there is one winner in life and everybody else is a loser. Notice how often he uses that term loser and how often political oppositionists, he's got to just berate them mercilessly, right? Sleepy Joe Biden, always making fun of Biden. You don't need to do that as president of the United States. So I disagree politically with Joe Biden, with the Democrats, but berating and calling them names like a 5-year-old, that's not what a president of the United States should be doing. It's not what a president or prime minister of any state should be doing. Anyways, I hope that answers your question, mystery guest. And I want to thank you for filling in for Dr. Bellato. And I'll let you take this home and tell us about what's going to happen next week. I want to thank Colonel Holacek for joining me, the mystery guest, the mystery questioner, and say something about next week's show, which we hope we can have Dr. Bellato with us again. We do part 2 of Is Donald Trump a True Jeffersonian? Next week, we'll focus not so much on the characters of the two as we have today, but on their political vision. Does Donald Trump have the same political vision, or nearly so, as Jefferson? We then focus on Jefferson's principles for sound Republican government and critically assess Trump's adherence to those principles. So thank you for watching, for enjoying the show, and please like and share and comment plentifully on whether you agree with Dr. Holacek's or Colonel Holacek's take. And we'll do this again next week.